When I hear you talk about animal products and sugar, I take it very seriously and I hear it. But for some reason, the subject of salt doesn't seem to be registering. And I have flax crackers that have salt, and I have sauerkraut that has salt. And sometimes if I'm in a restaurant and they serve the guacamole, it has salt. And I don't seem to be like registering like that I'm doing something. With sugar, I'm completely, absolutely, I will not eat it if it is sugar. What is your thought on salt? Am I supposed to be taking it seriously as a health concern, or is there more flexibility?
Salt is an important issue, especially for blood pressure and for gastrointestinal risk for cancer, certain things like that. But the American Heart Association recommends really trying to get it below 1,500, really 2,300. But if you have an issue, to stay below 1,500 milligrams a day. And the cool thing about sodium, and I've seen this with hundreds of people that I've worked with, is that you can really manage your palate. And you could, if you have a little bit too much and you need more, it's like you increase your threshold for cravings or for need for that salting. So you could actually go down and reduce and start to notice the natural salt flavor, saltiness in foods like celery or actual whole foods. But it just takes an adjustment. And once you do that, it's really easy to enjoy your food without all of that sodium. But if it's easy to do if you're avoiding processed foods, because that's where it's in there. But it's again compared to what? Like if you look at the same amount of bread versus potato chips, and the bread, the salt is baked in, you have the same amount of salt, but because the salt is on the surface of the chip, you taste it because it makes right onto your tongue. So, not cooking with it, adding it at the end, or using it in small doses and trying to maintain it under 1,500 milligrams a day by eating whole foods and not using all the extra processed foods that you get at the store it's not that hard to do, but it is important. I do recommend people mind their sodium.
I do agree too. So I think that there's some distinctions that need to be made, of course, because you have the difference between somebody with hypertension or heart failure, which I deal with a lot, which is a lot of fluid retention. The science is extraordinarily strong that you should limit salt intake. 1,500 milligrams is a great number to try to keep it under. For the healthy person who eats plant-based, that's when the data, the science is a little more foggy. And I've read through it and all the studies. And of course, there's very few studies that have exclusively whole food plant-based eaters. Almost all the studies on salt are people who are more standard American or something like that. So to try to extrapolate how salt would impact somebody who ate whole food plant-based is extraordinarily difficult and challenging. And I had a hard time figuring this out myself, because when I hear other experts like McDougall, who put salt shakers on the table at his buffets, and then I talked to Kim Williams, who I trust a lot. I haven't met another physician that's more genuine and into the data and scientific without any conflicts of interest than Kim Williams, the past ACC president. And I asked him, specifically, what's the data on salt in healthy people, especially eat more whole food plant-based? And he's just like, I don't know. It's a question that I don't think the science has answered, but common sense would say, don't go crazy with it. Don't really overdo it. Now, it helps. The thing where salt comes into play is when people are struggling to maintain the healthy diet, and you're asking them again to give up all these other things, give up the animal products. Most salt comes from processed foods. So as long as you got rid of processed foods completely, letting them put some salt on their whole unprocessed plant-based meals, if they don't have hypertension or heart failure or a very high tendency for heart disease, is that really going to devastate their health? And if it helps them to maintain the diet, the plant-based in the long term, I don't think it's as devastating. Of course, don't go 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 milligrams, which a lot of Americans do. I forget the average number. It's something like 8,000 or 8,300 milligrams of salt. It's some insane number that the average American eats every day. And so heart disease, heart failure, don't do it. Most salt comes from processed foods. If you're whole food plant-based and you're healthy, it's the data, the science is really questionable. Still don't go bonkers with it, but if it was a little bit here and there to help you maintain it or make something taste good when you have guests over that aren't whole food plant-based, whatever, I don't think it's devastating personally.
Let me throw one more curveball in there. And that is that in talking with a good friend of mine, Dotsie Bosch, who was Olympic medalist at the London Games in 2012, Salt is extremely important for people who are exercising extensively and elite athletes, because they are losing a lot of it as they're exercising. And if their sodium level drops appreciably and they're not replacing it, they will start getting really severe muscle cramps. So again, if you are actively exercising and doing a lot of exercise, you got to make sure you're staying sodium replete. And I just want to add, since my sort of thing in the plant-based movement is trying to point out to people that we are natural herbivores, is that our desire and taste for salt is one of the things that points out that we are herbivores, because all herbivores have a natural desire for salt. If you think about it, in the wild, herbivores search out salt licks and actively seek salt, whereas carnivores do not. So carnivores have no internal mechanism to tell them to seek salt. And there were actually some rather unfortunate studies that were done in the 1950s where they artificially depleted dogs' food of salt, and they fed the dogs and had a little bowl of salt right next to their food. And the dogs came out every day, ate their food, didn't lick the salt, and died from sodium depletion. So anyway, the fact that we like salt points out that we are plant eaters. But as Steve said, do not overdo it, because you can do that, and that will interfere with your health.
Well, there's an old saying, when you're a hammer, you see everything as a nail. And because most of the people that I'm working with are coming to me because they have food addictions and are trying to lose weight, I will tell you that for these people, salt is a very, very powerful appetite stimulant. The more salt you eat, the more food you'll eat. And if your goal is to lose weight by eating less food, it's probably not a good strategy. But I agree, of course, with Julieanna that almost all the salt most people are getting is coming from processed food, where it's hidden, not from table salt. So I will tell you, as a chef, there are ways to make your food absolutely delicious without salt. I find salt a very lazy way to season food. It's addictive. As Dr. Goldhammer says, it's a chemical that's added to the food that fools the brain satiety mechanism, causes people to eat at least 11% more calories. So what I recommend for people that aren't willing to ditch the salt shaker are to use things that have salt in them, that are salty tasting, but that have less sodium. For example, a teaspoon of table salt has roughly 2,400 milligrams of sodium. A teaspoon of a low sodium miso, which is very salty tasting and has health benefits, has approximately 110 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon. So salt is 24 times the amount of sodium as miso. And with the miso, you're still getting a salty flavor and you're getting health benefits. Things like coconut aminos have about 90 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon. Again, a 1:24 ratio. So for people that aren't completely willing to ditch the salt shaker and learn how to cook SOS free and use things like herbs and spices, I think that is a much better option. Also, even if you do eat salt, just like even if you do eat sugar and oil, never cook with it because it dissipates. If you're browning onions with oil and then make it into a soup, you can't taste it anymore, just like you can't taste salt in cooking. So my preference is to do what Dr. McDougall does and let people add it at the table where the taste buds on the tip of their tongue can actually taste the salt. That said, if somebody is interested in going truly SOS free, that's my niche, and I've learned how to make food taste delicious. But it could take about a month of eating no salt or going lower salt for food to taste good, because people have neuroadapted to a diet so high in sugar, fat, and salt that they can't appreciate the saltiness in celery or in chard. And that's why when people go on a water fast and you refeed them, they're like, oh my God, this is so salty. So I'm not anti-salt for everyone, but I will say for some people, they may want to eliminate it or at least reduce it depending on what their goals are.